Welcome back, everyone. This is the second of the month of Elul, base Elul, and we're going to continue the discussion slash activation of divine power that we're going to be working on throughout this month. So I want to just mention, as I get started, that Hasidus, authentic Kabbalah, tells us that when a teacher, and the teacher could be, an ordinary person, could be a lecturer, could be God. When a teacher wants to transmit something, some piece of wisdom or some piece of deep information to a student, and the student is very different from the teacher. The student's on a very different level, a much lower level than the teacher, and the student's mind isn't really receptive to something so different from how he ordinarily thinks. So the teacher, or think about a speaker, will start to engage, to open the student or the listener to that transmission by either telling a joke or saying something mind-blowing. Why is that? Because literally a joke is a surprise. It opens the mind. A very deep concept that the listener can feel but can't quite absorb in the mind also opens. It opens the mind. And once the mind is open, not only new information can come in, but an actual transmission can come in, because the truth is we can hear information in words, but when do we really understand it? When is it really ours? When it activates some kind of knowing inside of our being. Only when information has become ours, has entered into our system, can we work with it in a real way. So that's actually what's happening here now. What's happening in the world is that God is transmitting, the creator, all that is, the one, the true being, of which we are all part. There's nothing else. There's nothing else here. It's just the one, including you and me, in costumes, in many costumes. So in order for the creator at this time in history to transmit a new way of being, a new potential, a new reality, the vision of the future, the power to manifest that future, that destiny, in order for us to be able to receive it, our minds must be open. And most people have very closed minds. It goes with the territory of being human. We try to figure things out. We try to categorize them. We kind of get our fixed ideas, whether from our parents or from our early schooling or from experiences that we've had. And all of us basically are know-it-alls. And that is one of the reasons why we are in such a state of division, even divisiveness right now, because each one of us is absolutely sure that we know it all. And anybody who doesn't think like us looks pretty crazy, true or not true. Share whether you think it's true or not true in the chat. So that is a sign of the closed mind. That is a sign of a mind not ready to receive. I think that one of the things that's happening now, and I will keep repeating that we are in a spiritual war. The world was created in a state of spiritual war, of mida keneged mida, of zeh umat zeh, of a point and counterpoint in a state of polarity. The early example is that God was present in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve in this perfect universe, and yet there was a snake that was, the Kabbalah tells us, was the embodiment of all evil. And then that snake was cunning and convinced the two humans who were put into the world, and we're all cells in their souls, in their cosmic bodies, all of us, every human who exists on the earth at any time. So those humans were put into the world in order to do a divine mission, and the snake was put into the garden as a counterforce. And then the snake, when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that counterforce, that evil negative energy, that anti-God was internalized, and it created a polarity within our own beings. We have a godly soul. There's a part of our soul which is divine. And then we have an animalistic soul. We only have one soul, but there's so different parts of the soul that it's considered as if it's different souls. There are levels of the soul. Soul's a complicated thing. But the point is that we are in a state of war. Proof, some days you wake up, on task, you're ready to go with your deeper goals. Some days you wake up in a dark mood and you'll undermine yourself. You have mixed feelings. You have moods. You fight with yourself. That's the nature of being human. So this is a fractal. The entire universe's state is created in that state of polarity. And the goal is for the divine to be revealed within the the conflict, just like the goal of lifting weights is for your true force and power to be revealed and manifested in your body. The point of all challenges is to reveal new miraculous levels within the soul, within the life. Anyway, back to the original point, that in order to transmit something new, the teacher has to blow the student's mind open enough that he begins to question himself. It's a touchy process. It's a tricky process. But what's happening in our world right now is causing all of us to question what life is, what's going to happen. And think back to a few years ago. Most of us, even if we had personal struggles, which basically we all do, and personal worries, ditto, but most of us pretty much knew that the world was going to always go on the way it always had gone on before. That's no longer true. Our minds are being blown. Again, it's a tricky process. It's kind of a dangerous time. Kabbalah says there's an analogy given that when a person is climbing from one level to another, and he takes climbing a ladder, and he takes his foot off the lower rung in order to lift it to a higher rung. So it's a very dangerous time because he's only got one foot on the ladder and one foot is in motion, and it would be much easier than usual to fall. So when we're climbing, things feel unstable. When our minds are being blown open, things feel unstable. They feel unpredictable. And part of our task here is to move from that state of instability in a way that terrifies us to what's sometimes called metastability, which is the ability to be stable and resilient in motion as we're moving up the ladder. And we are, in fact, moving up the ladder. We are really in the final stages of a move from history to destiny. What is a destiny? It's the promise of the Torah, the world of redemption, a world of divinity revealed, of the soul shining through the bodies, of true oneness, of miraculous good. I've been talking about this over and over. The month of Elul is a special time to receive a new kind of light and to be able to use that light to heal what needs healing from the past, and to prepare to create an openness to receive a new light from the future. So Elul is that hinge point. Now, because we're in a state of spiritual war, we have to be very, very, very careful not to be sidetracked by the many distractions. You know how in movies about war, there are people that beat on the drum and they make scary sounds, and it's all designed to get you out of your zone. We need to be in our zone. Our core effort has to be to get more deeply and deeply into that state of metastability inside of our zone, where we're moving up the ladder, and yet we're not falling down. So in order for that to happen, we need to understand that there's something new coming into the world. It's not more of the old. Now, it's very clear to me that what's happening now is the final set of battles in the war that existed from the beginning of time, the snake in the garden, and then things that happen throughout the history, which are described in the Torah. There are players in every stage of history who are anti-God. They're anti the mission and the light of the Torah. Just to use Pharaoh as an example, that Moses came to Pharaoh, and he said, "God sent me." And Pharaoh consulted his list of gods, which was long in Egypt. And he's like, "Who is this God? I don't know this God. This isn't my God." And then it became a battle, a showdown, to show Pharaoh, standing in the heart of power in this land of Egypt, to show him that the God of Moses, is a God more powerful than all these gods, that there is a one divine consciousness that is everything, and that there is nothing else, only the illusion of something else, only costumes. So in that process, ultimately Moses prevailed. The Jewish people, the souls of Israel, came out of Egypt with sound and fury and miracles and received the Torah on behalf of all mankind. And the battle didn't stop then. It continued. And in every generation, there are reincarnations and reenactments of these same figures, of these same forces. Another force that I want to bring here is the generation of Babel, the Tower of Babel, the Dor HaFlaga. They after the flood, those people who had apparently very powerful tools at their disposal were unhappy with the idea that there was a force that could destroy the world. And their thought was, let's build a tower so high after the flood that no flood can consume us, that this God will not be able to dominate us anymore. And they all were united in that mission. And God himself saw that they would be successful if they were not stopped, and he dispersed them in one way by changing their languages so that they could no longer understand each other. They couldn't be united in that negative process, and dispersing them all over the world. So that brings to, there are many points in history where different conditions were superimposed into humanity. This is just one of them. And I'm going to keep it, I'm not going to dwell on it right now because I want to keep this fairly short. But what's happening now is we're seeing a reenactment or an enhancement, an aggravation of that extreme divisiveness where we can't understand each other. And many of us feel like lost and alone and confused. And the idea is to understand what's happening, to not reinforce that, to not go down that road, but to find the inner connection and the inner oneness so that we can unite to bring about a world of good, a world without danger and destruction, but not from the place of fighting with God, but from the place of fighting for God. There's a vast difference. And all of these forces, let's say the same players, the same souls that built the Tower of Babel, Tower of Babel, the same forces that oppressed the souls of Israel in Egypt, the same forces, some people might connect them with the fallen angels, the same forces that have been, that ultimately are included in the primordial snake, and that just show up in so many different ways. Some recorded in the Torah and some not. Those same forces, by the way, exist in us. We are created force, counterforce. So we have to be wise to those forces. Those forces are created for one and only one reason, to create a counterforce to divine light so that we can defeat it, and in defeating it, transform ourselves, transform that darkness into light. So for that to happen, we have to understand what the process is, what the war is. And the key for today, in the second day of Elul, is to understand that any attempt to divide us, any attempt to pit us against each other is a tool of the snake. I don't care whether you're pro-vax, anti-vax, I hope it's okay to even say vax online. I don't care what your beliefs are in terms of medicine. I don't care about any of that. That is an individual. I do care very much about personal freedom of choice. I have a very strong bias for that. And I have my biases medically too, but that's not relevant. What's relevant is that there is a process here that we have to understand and align ourselves with. And at all costs, we need to try to understand the point of view of another person and to make space for their choices. Not to control each other, not to dominate each other, not to all have one perspective, but to find the unity within the diversity, to find the place where all of us are souls and bodies. All of us are struggling. All of us, sorry about that, all of us are in a world where fear, as I've said before, is being weaponized against us. And we have to know who the actual enemy is. And on the deepest level, that actual enemy is the snake. Any force that attempts to suppress people, that attempts to suppress understanding, tolerance, unity, freedom, is simply a manifestation of a negative force in this war. Fear is a manifestation of a negative force in this war. Fear is the opposite of love. We are commanded in the Shema prayer and other places as well to love God. I think I said this 2 days ago. To love God with all of our being, all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our might. This is the cardinal commandment, to know God, to know that God is one. Hear, O Israel. Israel means the core of the soul. The Lord our God, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, meaning that God, whether he is above creation completely, whether he's embedded in the quantum core of creation, or whether he, or I should say he, she, it, whatever, all there is showing up in the affairs of the world and the affairs of the human life. It's all one God, like one force of electricity that can show up in an electric toothbrush or a nuclear power plant, or the wiring of a city. It's one force. There's one divine presence. There's one divine will, and it's right here and right now. And it's in every one of us. We need to seek out the divine in ourselves and in each other. We need to notice. We need to be highly alert and even allergic to, in a good way. any attempt to scare us or divide us. Fear is the anti-God. Fear is anti-love. We are here, our destiny is to be in a love affair with God, who is visibly in a love affair with us. The world of redemption is a world without any pain or fear. And how does that happen? Because God will reveal and is ready, is waiting to reveal that love to us. So here's the deal about Elul. Elul is a time, as I said before, and I'll keep repeating it, when Anila Dodi Vidodi Li, God says, it's an acronym for the month of Elul, I am to my beloved, and beloved, my beloved is to me. We are the beloved. God comes to us into where we are smiling, inviting us to step into a new relationship. We cannot do that from a state of fear. We can do it with our fear. We can come into that new relationship and say, I'm afraid and I want to experience love. I want to be in a love affair, so help me. That's fine. That's very appropriate. But to be afraid, to hide out, to withdraw, to suppress, to put on a show, to try to force ourselves to show up as something we're not, that is maintaining the state of fear. What we resist persists, core principle of the universe. So when we understand that anything that brings us into a state of fear shuts us down, closes off the soul, closes off that love affair with God, the potential for it. I know for some people that might seem like an impossible dream. It's not. Anything that shuts that off is ungodly and needs to be pushed away, cleared, up-leveled, transmuted, transformed, eliminated. And how does that happen? In Elul, there's a partnership. There's always a partnership with God, but in Elul, this is the time. God shows up in different times, in different roles, with different energies. This is a time when we can step in, when we can choose to initiate a new relationship, and in that new relationship, to transmute fear into love. So we want to transmit fear into love within ourselves. We want to transmute fear into love with God. We want to transmute fear into love when we look at other people. So it's not only an emotional thing. I want to say fear and love are also energetic positioning. So fear, by its nature, is a moving back and a moving away from something. The way we experience it in our bodies is like a cringing, like a contraction, like a closing in. Sometimes it causes us to react and burst out, explode outward, like a tea kettle that's got too much pressure and then it starts to whistle. But essentially, fear is emotion away from something, a contractive emotion. Love, by definition, is a drawing towards something and a drawing out of self, of the soul, into expression into the world. So here's what I want to leave you with for today. Avoid, like the plague, any thought, belief, source, influence that has you turning against other people or seeing other people as the problem. We're all here to learn the final lessons and to make the final transformations. So everything is an opportunity for wisdom. Resist at all costs any propulsion, any attempts of anyone, including your inner self, to have you have the need to force other people to be like you. Again, this is toxic. The Geula will come as a result of unconditional love. The generation of Babel had to be interfered with, dispersed on purpose, because the power of connection, and it doesn't mean we're all the same. It means we all respect each other and we all are working on behalf of one thing, which is a divine world. That gives us a superpower. That gives us the power to change reality, which is why God saw that they were going to change reality and had to intervene. But now we're fighting the war on God's side, on the side of the Creator, on the side of destiny. So it has to be a deep respect, tolerance, work in progress, attempt to understand, or at least make space for, allow for the fact that none of us really know the truth. We all have our preferences and biases, and we should respect those. But ultimately, even bigger than that, is the freedom for each of us to have our perspectives and biases and to discuss them freely and to share information and to together create something, a bigger reservoir of wisdom than any of us could alone. There are forces that are fighting very strongly against that, and again, are trying to divide us. So we have to resist any attempts to do that with full force and to help other people to see that as well. That is the core, that is the prime directive right now. Love. And I don't mean love in a sappy way. I mean love in a state of deep connection, in the sense of deep connection. That is the healing for our times. Divine love is our divine power. What do I mean by love? I don't, again, just mean, oh, I love you, you're nice. I mean, to be drawn toward destiny, to be drawn toward the light, to shine the light, to help pull out other people's light, to create an environment and a frame of light, which on a human level comes out as tolerance, respect, conscious listening, making space for. Geula is essentially freedom. It is the counter to gullus, to exile, which is essentially slavery. Freedom is imperative. Okay? Freedom means everybody has to be able to be themselves. Freedom means everybody has to be able to share ideas, exchange thoughts. We don't have to agree with other people's thoughts. We can hear their point of view. At least we can tolerate them having their point of view. This would be a big shift, and it's a very powerful shift that will bring incredible blessings to all of us. So here's the other thing. We can, any radio, a two-way radio, you have not a ham radio, you have a walkie-talkies. So you press the button when you want to speak, you're on transmit. You press a different button or let go of the button, you're on receive. Most of us, because of the war that we're in, because these forces are literally trying to co-opt us into terror and hatred, compliance, judgment, division, separation. Because of that, and before I even say this, I want to say, I've neglected to say something else. It's very clear to me that humanity, if left on its own, meaning if people would stop interfering, if the snake would stop interfering at this point in history, humanity is evolved enough that left on our own, we would find solutions to problems. We are in a state of awakening. The world is awakening. The soul is expressing itself more and more. All of us are getting more and more sensitive to energy, to feeling each other's energy, to being able to be connected beyond space and time, beyond the physical, some more than others, but it's so common to be able to hear your inner voice, to be able to get messages from your deeper self, to be able, to sense things, to send good thoughts to someone else and to help heal their problems at a distance. These are superpowers that only great tzaddikim had in the past, but because of where we are in such a high level of awakening potential right now, that these forces, the negative forces, are bombarding us with all of their power in order to shut it down. The minute it's like a lid, the cake, the yeast is making the cake rise, but it's being pressed down by the lid, and it's still kind of slipping out around the edges of the lid. So the counter force that is attempting to suppress us is doing it through some very specific mechanisms with some very specific goals. Hate your neighbor, don't tolerate them, see them as the enemy, don't think for yourself, be in a state of constriction and fear, do things based on fear, not on your deep knowing. Okay, and this is the last piece which I started to say before about the walkie-talkies, where we are on receive when we allow those things to impact us. Sometimes we don't have a choice; it just happens. We get triggered, but a trigger does not have to be followed by an automatic reaction, a default reaction of fear. You might feel the fear. It's an opportunity to make a different choice. It's an opportunity to expand. I think Viktor Frankl said the space between the stimulus and the response, maybe I'm misquoting a little bit, is the space of freedom. It's the space of choice. We want to find that space of freedom. Geula is about freedom. So consciousness. So when we're receiving automatically from the bombardment of not only the fear that's being projected on the world and the hatred that's being projected on the world, but the fear that we're all picking up from each other, because we pick up things from each other now because we have become so much more sensitive because the awakening is happening. It's a divine awakening and it's happening. It's an energy, though, that we need to channel and use for the good to win this war. So what I want to suggest for everybody, the other thing I want to suggest for everybody here is, instead of just being on receive, consider that when you can shift something in your own being, when you experience fear and you can create out of it an opportunity for wisdom, when you hear somebody, when you're able to hear somebody else and their point of view, which feels threatening because it's different from your own, and you can find a space of tolerance, and you can find love and oneness in your separateness without having to squash anyone, You are now ready to influence the system. So I want to suggest for you, for each of us, that we start to broadcast into the system. What is the system? It's the collective consciousness of humanity. It's the collective field of the universe. We want to become broadcasters into that field, not just recipients. So there's receiving and being manipulated to the nth degree that we need to say no to. Then there's protecting ourselves in our own individual bubble. That's a good start. But then there's becoming a force for the good into the world. That can be as simple as doing the work in your own being, in a state of prayer, connecting to God. That can be as simple as reaching out to someone else, regardless of whether they agree with you or not, sending them some love, sending them some support, whatever it is, finding a way to find common ground. And that can extend to, what do you teach your children? What do you say to your neighbors? Where are you standing in your being when you express yourself? Is it in a state of truth and connection, divine power, love? Or is it in a state of defensiveness or aggressiveness or passivity or helplessness? When we can stand in that essential self, that essential connection, that is the essence of love, because that is a connection with ourselves, a connection with God, a connection with our potential that then will flow into the system of the world, into the collective consciousness of humanity, and start to heal things. It doesn't take that many people to reverse the direction of the energy, because this is a divine war, and the king is in the field, as we talked about in the last broadcast. That's the quality of Elul. It's the second of Elul. We have another 28 days or whatever to access this energy, this divine energy that is here with us in the fray, that wants us to initiate a love affair with God. When you have a beloved, somebody marries a very powerful person, or is somehow connected to a very powerful person who's in love with them, can't resist doing what they want. So that person's efforts, that person, him or herself, may not be so powerful, but whoa, when you're married to someone super powerful, all you have to do is say, honey, I need help. And you have all the help in the world. And we have that when we are fighting on the right side of the war, when we understand it's a war, when we know where we're going, when we know that we're big players and we choose to be players instead of helpless victims or co-opted, unconscious soldiers for the opposition. We don't want that. We want to be conscious, and we want to be on the right side. So by understanding that you are fighting a spiritual war, and you're not doing it in a way that has to be scary. What does that mean? It's a war of consciousness. You are receiving a new light that is attempting to come into the world. You are working to integrate it into your own being and to broadcast it into the collective, just by living it, just by standing in it, just by speaking from that place. Whatever conversations you have, you can be in the line in the grocery store when you're speaking from truth, and maybe you know what I'm talking about. Let me know if you've had this experience of speaking from your truth, speaking from a place of no reactivity, no manipulation. I am here, and I am on, and I am receiving, and I'm on a divine mission, and I have God with me. It might sound like simplistic, but it's so not. It requires a shift in your grounded being. It requires a connection to your core and to your source that is so strong and clear that you cannot be pushed to one side or another. And if you do get triggered, you can go back to center. We all need to find our center. And what is our center? The core of our soul, the core of our creator, and that relationship. When we do that, and when we consciously stand in that, we become massively powerful players. And like the Rambam says, like Maimonides says, he describes the whole world as being in perfect balance, like a scale between good and evil, to the point where one good action, one good word, or even one good thought can tip the entire scale into salvation, into redemption. So each of us has that power. It doesn't take that much, because the awakening is already present, because the light is already here. And that's why there's such an intense effort to confuse us, to distract us, to pit us against each other. Don't fall for it. Become a strong, strong source of light. Okay, that's the message for Elul, and ask God for help. That intimate love affair is where all of our healing is going to come from. You have to find a relationship with God that is beyond the trauma of the past. A new relationship is possible. And for that, we have to forgive the past and let go of it. But that's a topic of another conversation. Maybe I'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, everybody, if you relate to this, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions. Please feel free to share with other people if you feel like it's helpful. And I'll see you next time. We cannot be in an illusion anymore. It's time to awaken ourselves and to really dig into that deeper truth, to find our own center, to find that line of connection above and within, and to live from there. And at that point, as I said, it won't take many, and it won't take long, and things will reverse. Because we have a partner, and that partner is not only all powerful, but all there is. Okay, and the whole point of the war is to bring out that absolute beingness in each of us. That's part of our destiny. Okay, talk to you soon. Take care.